Доброе утро, уважаемые коллеги. Давайте начинать. Мы немножко начинаем с некоторым опозданием, но тем не менее.
So we are starting our conference. We are a little bit late, but everybody is here.
Хотел
First of all,
приветствовать на
I would like to welcome everybody at the opening of the 6th International Conference on Renewable Energy Sources and Low Carbon Energy in the Far East. This is the 6th conference in Yakutsk, and I think that this is a great event, taking into account that, indeed, many people think that renewable energy sources should be developed in the Far East, taking into account the high price of delivered fuel and quite inefficient diesel generation. That is why the development of renewable energy in the Far East is a good story, and I'm very pleased that Yakutsk is hosting the conference for the 6th time and is discussing this topic. I have to say that Yakutsk is working quite actively in this area. In September, there was a forum on energy sufficiency in the Far East. So I think that this is an important event, and I'm very pleased that I was invited as a moderator. My name is Ilya Dalmatov. I head the Institute of Economy and Energy areas of infrastructure. We work with tariffs, and we understand the price of electrical energy, how expensive it is in the Far East, and what are the measures taken by the government. And of course, we work with the issues of modernization and RES, and they are very topical. That is why I'm very pleased to be invited, and I'm glad that we are going to have a round table where we will be able to discuss the issues. It is dedicated today to the large-scale modernization of energy infrastructure in the regions of the Far East Federal District using renewable energy sources. What do we need to start? I would like to ask the speakers, and we have today the representatives of executive authorities and businesses and academia, and we have a colleague from China, our strategical partner. So I think that the discussion will be quite interesting, and of course, I would like to ask everybody what we lack for the large-scale development of renewable energy sources. What problems do you see, and what are the solutions for the development of this sector, efficient development? As long as all participants are quite professional, I think that we will have an interesting discussion. But as usual, we are quite short of time, so I would like to ask the speakers to speak not longer than 7 minutes, and if we have something to discuss, we will have the discussions. Now I will start with the executive authorities. Today we have here Sergei Dudkin, Deputy Head, Electricity Regulation Department, Federal Anti-Monopoly Service of Russia. It's a mega regulator in anti-monopoly and tariffs. They place their efforts in developing energy generation in the country, and a lot depends on them in terms of development incentives of renewable energy sources. So I would ask Mr. Dudkin to tell us about their initiatives for us to understand the direction.
Сергей Анатольевич, вам слово.
So, Mr. Dudkin, please.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody.
Я прежде всего хочу
First of all, I would like to start with the information that what has been done and what we need for launching. And I think that we launched it some 2 to 3 years ago in 2020, when for the territories that are not joined to the unified energy system of Russia with isolated generation, we launched long-term tariff regulation. And we started to implement the measures to preserve the economizing of fuel expenses, which provided funding source for the investment projects and energy service projects. In my presentation, I would like to show you all these bills and laws that we're using. We started to work on modernizing involving tariff regulators. We started in 2019 when we adopted the decree of government number 64, which stipulated the preservation of economy of fuel expenses for the territories of local energy supply in the Far East and the Arctic, using hybrid generation that we will discuss today a lot. And the openness and transparency of this work has been also highlighted and noted in this decree. We have to disclose our expenses. And of course, the preservation of economy longer than the payback period, 2 years more than the payback period, which also is quite an incentive for this, for such kind of projects. Our work started in 2020 when we switched to long-term tariff regulation. This is the 3rd year of such project. And in many projects, in many regions, investment projects are implemented related to the modernization of local energy system. Yakutia has the most of such projects because this is the largest region of the Russian Federation, and whatever can be encountered in tariff regulations in the entire Russia can be encountered in Yakutia because it's huge. That's why there are a lot of pilot projects and a lot of changes that have to do with improvement of already adopted documents on the long-term tariff regulation. And they are improved based on the projects that are being implemented or are scheduled for implementation in Yakutia. The legal acts are 2 orders of the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service, Order 686 on setting the tariffs in the isolated territories. And this year we adopted another order registered by the Ministry of Justice to set tariffs for wind energy generated from renewable energy sources. Instead of the old methodology, it was reapproved, where they implement a totally new mechanism when a long-term price for RES facilities is the price proposed by the winner of the competition. So the approach has been shifted from tariff application to a long-term price formed as a parameter from the competition proposed by the organization that is planning to generate electrical energy based on renewable energy sources. Another important order on the example of Yakutia's settlement. It was amended in February-March this year, and they have to do not only with economizing on fuel expenses, but also on the possible change of electric energy source. And we reviewed the reason for such changes. It had to do with Chersky settlement, with Chukotsk Energo, and this change allows us, in case the decision is made to establish own generation in this settlement. If they decide to disconnect from Chukotka grid, then the entire economizing of these expenses, including the losses that will be gone from the system, it will become a source of funding for these modernization works. So briefly, these are the changes that were already approved and they are already in place. We also have some developments that are now in the process of coordination, and I hope that they will be adopted soon. They have to do with bilateral agreements where the prices for electrical energy will be determined upon the agreement of parties. And the reduction of economizing upon the application of the regulated organization will allow to reduce the payback period, and the economized funds can be used for creating the electrical grid complex to connect the isolated settlements. The work is active, it is not stopping, and the examples that we are discussing, they give us the grounds for new changes and new ideas, and they give way to new projects. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Dudkin. Yes, indeed, Mr. Dudkin is a person who is developing these regulations on many of these issues, and I'm glad that a number of such incentives is being implemented, and they allow us to develop renewable energy sources. And I believe that, of course, our legal framework is not perfect, that it requires upgrades, because we always have some new tasks. And it's great that the Federal Anti-Monopoly Service can hear the regulators and the consumers and make conditions for the development of the area. So the fact that Mr. Dudkin is attending our event proves that the problems that we are facing, they can be solved. So one of the tasks of our roundtable is to identify these problems and to discuss them, to see whether they interfere with the development of RES, and then to discuss them at the federal level. By our plan, I would like to give the floor to three representatives from the chairmanships of companies Magadan Energo, Kamchatsk Energo, and Sakhalin Energo. They will tell us how the projects are organized in practice. So what problems do you see that require solving, and how is our legal framework arranged? So I would like to ask you to share your opinion. Now I would like to give the floor to Mark Khasyanov, Deputy Director General, Magadan Energo. Thank you for your invitation to attend the forum. The development of energy industry and the local energy industry is, of course, closely connected with the development of economy and the region itself. And for persistent implementation of renewable electrical energy service with low carbon print and to provide autonomous settlements with power, we need a target federal program. No, there is no such investor or businessman who will be able to secure the implementation of these tasks for different reasons. And investments in energy production, they have to be from the state, because this is the duty of the state to develop its territory. The problems of tariff regulation, yes, it exists, but dear colleagues, tariff is what we pay. As long as the tariff is regulated, it doesn't allow us to include the expenses that are related to the development. So the consumers, they don't have to pay for what we need to develop. This is the duty of the state. When it is created, then these expenses, they will melt. The amortization, the depreciation, and the exploitation of the projects and facilities. So what are the major problems related to the implementation and introduction of renewable energy sources in the isolated settlements? What are the main points? There is no specific understanding of the further development of this settlement. Half of the population are waiting for being resettled, for getting some incentives and benefits in the mainland to move from these territories and to forget that they have ever lived there. This is a totally wrong approach to the territory's development. We are the local people. We were born here and we grew up here, and we understand that every square meter of the territory, the developed meter, is the merit of our previous generations. And if we leave this territory, then there will be taiga there in about 3-5 years, and we will have to start the development from scratch. The second reason is the condition, the status of local networks. Communal networks. Nothing has been done there since the 1990s. So the capacity that they have had from the Soviet period, they are still using it now. That is why the modernization of local energy requires a comprehensive approach from the very beginning to the very end. So we have to find a concrete and specific source of energy. It might be wind energy, solar energy with batteries, and our modern technologies, they allow to use all of that. In particular, in Magadan Oblast, there is a whole district where energy production, let's say a large energy production, for a number of reasons, does not exist. It's not there. In Yakutia, there are also some settlements like Deputatsky, for example. They are located not very far from the centers, but the creation of infrastructure for bringing power supply is very, very expensive. And we cannot even discuss any payback, only state investment for the creation of infrastructure, which has to be also very efficient and has to have very little exploitation expenses and very little losses, taking into account all the prospects and minimization of costs. As for the potential, our regions, they are extremely rich in both natural resources and the resources for renewable energy, including wind, water, sun. We have all of that. In particular, in Magadan energy system, we have symbiosis of traditional energy production and renewable energy sources. Then the problems of heating plants is that we have to bring the fuel from far away. And Rus Hydro Company, they have developed a concept for renewable energy development, including the establishment of wind power plants, because the coast of Okhotsk Sea, it allows to use this potential of wind and to use this energy for heating or electricity to the consumers. As for the hydro energy, the potential of the installed capacity is just huge, and I cannot say that it is not used completely. For example, you have the installed capacity of 1 gigawatt in Kolyma hydropower station, and you use only 300 to 400 megawatts, so you have a lot of unused energy. No, we cannot say that, because the reserve is limited by the reserve of water in the reservoir. And in winter, and we have winter for 9 months, there is no inflow of water to the reservoir. So these interbalance solutions that are working in central Russia, they are not working in our territories. And that's the same as true for renewable energy sources. It cannot be used in full. So, to put it simply, there are a lot of problems, and they need to be solved. We have to move forward and develop, and this is our basic task. But we have to develop in a right direction. I can see that we have a lot of representatives of academic circles. Maybe they can help us. Thank you.
Действительно, вы правильно сказали, что начинать надо и от развития регионов.
Mr. Kasyanov, yes, you were right in saying that we have to start with developing the economic potential of the region, and we have to make the living conditions for the population comfortable. Yes, I agree that renewable energy sources in general in Russia, they are very expensive, and without budget support, they cannot survive. We can also use some crossed subsidizing and some other mechanisms, but it is important that in the territory of the Far East, taking into account the quite expensive price of diesel generation, we can find some points where the payback of this renewable energy sources projects can be quite efficient based on the economically reasoned tariff that we use currently. And we can provide our consumers with some lower tariffs due to some subsidies and other mechanisms, which is also great because the government does understand that energy has to be available for the population. So here, yes, it is indeed important to find some effective solutions and to find some solutions for budget and tariff funding, because in any case, the tariffs in this area, they are regulated, and it is important to synchronize budget and tariff legal framework. Okay, so this was the opinion of Mr. Khasyanov, and now we are moving to Kamchatsk-Energo. Alexey Lubin, branch director, Kamchatsk-Energo.
Здравствуйте, уважаемые коллеги. А можно пультик?
Good afternoon. Or good morning.
Согласен абсолютно.
I totally agree
Возможности развития
with the potentials of developing RES facilities working under the target program, which is to be here and which should be aimed
скажем так, минимизации
for minimizing the fuel factor
углеводородного топлива.
and using the hydrocarbons.
Камчатского края в целом, но
As for Kamchatka Krai,
на топливная генерация
we are dominated by the traditional power generation based on fuel oil burning, especially in the isolated areas of Kamchatka in the south.
представляемый филиал мною
So the branch I am representing is
источником
using
в нем
RES almost 100%. So we have almost all types of generation. So the Mutnovska plant working on hydrothermal energy
гидрообъекты
and also hydropower stations.
в крае. У нас имеется, скажем так, возможность роста.
There is potential for growth in our region, especially regarding the consumption. So we have existing clients and we have also prospective clients. And the program, and we have the program developed on developing facilities to cover the demand. And now we focus on RES generation.
Здесь процент в целом в
Here you
сравнении
see the
идет
percentage of
как в центральной части России, так и
the production of energy in the European part of Russia and in Kamchatka.
ориентир, конечно, мы берем
So our target is by 2035 to reach to cover 50-60% of our demand by renewable energy sources.
сами объекты.
So our facilities are located in this central isolated power grid, and so all the potential projects are connected to the central grid.
Строим
And we are also expanding or building wind farms with accumulators and also solar farms.
Ну, в целом, опять же, говорю, что
Again,
уже будем ставить
this year we are planning to install wind meters on the beaches to evaluate the wind potential of the region.
выраженной нагрузкой от ветра, и поэтому как бы не использовать их.
So we have high winds in the region, so it makes sense to use this potential.
В целом есть изолированные участки,
We have some isolated areas, but I'm going to talk about them tomorrow.
на которых можно принимать опыт, который уже реализован.
So I'm going to talk about some sites which could set example, some pilot projects. It's about hybrid power stations.
Площадка, которая возможна для реализации непосредственных объектов ВИА, она у нас имеется.
So we have a site,
Московских станций,
Mutnovskaya power plant,
хорошо обследованной,
which could be used as, again, a pilot site, because we have a higher hydrothermal source there. So there is potential for generating both electricity and heat.
термальных объектов. Здесь есть несколько, скажем так, трендов развития.
There are several development trends to be used at this site.
Возможность расширения установленной мощности.
So we can expand the existing capacity twice
Это те
using geothermal energy.
используют геотермальный флюид для выработки
So this facility using geothermal fluid.
та часть, которая проходит основной цикл генерации, можно превращать, используя мировой опыт.
And using the international experience, we can use the heat totally using, for example, binary stations. And there is technical potential for realizing this. And also we are considering projects
Пар идет на выработку электроэнергии.
to use the fluid as well, because we use mostly steam for power generation, and most of
Выработка электроэнергии и
hot water
в виде бинарной установки для того, чтобы
can be used in binary plants and be used as the hydro potential.
скажем так, площадных этих возможностей это все имеется. Поэтому в данном направлении будем тоже.
So we are going to work in this direction as well. And this site itself for wind farms and for wind meters
Будем рассматривать. У нас
is also going to be built,
ветровой потенциал,
because we have huge wind potential and all the necessary infrastructure to implement projects like this.
станции,
As for binary stations,
разработка и
we have done a lot, and
ТО этого проекта.
the feasibility study has been developed.
Скажем так, анализа существующих производителей для
And
реализации
we need to understand the potential of existing producers. We have developed several scenarios
этого цикла Ренкина, да, для
to implement, to introduce the Renke system
пошел
here.
производитель Ормат,
So
соответственно, даже с учетом
Ormat company followed this scenario, and though the equipment is quite expensive,
перспективной получается.
but with the existing tariffs, the prospects are good. Now we are
Двух этапов решения.
working on different solutions.
Естественно, которые
So we need to change the manufacturer,
образца с выходом на какую-то
and
целевую программу на подключение.
also we're thinking about entering some target state program.
Да, в двух направлениях работы.
So we are working in two directions, and
Будет геотермальный форум.
next year China is hosting a geothermal forum, and I think some solutions will be taken in this forum using the equipment produced by our friend countries.
Сами площадки
So the sites themselves
второй станции
for the construction of the second plant
хорошо проработаны.
are also well suited, so they are well studied, and
Использование технологий
it's again serves as a pilot sites for testing many sorts of equipment. So Mutnovskaya plant proved to be very reliable,
и технологии, которые мы используем, как
and the technologies we are using there to determine the location of the fluid horizons and the potential of its 100% extraction. We are also working on that, and our technological system makes us believe that this project is very promising.
Касаемо целевых ориентиров, я сказал, но даже в
Well, I've mentioned our targets already.
проработке экономической модели без организации ТЭО уже можно сказать, что
But even without the feasibility study done, you can say that this project can be implemented because there will be definitely some gains with substitution of using fuel oil.
поджигание углеводородной составляющей. Касаемо использования гидропотенциала.
As for hydropotential,
Данной площадке имеется все
so this site has all the facilities to implement this direction as well. Well, there are some challenges
законодательную базу
which are to be solved on the legislative level.
внесения в региональные нормативы,
And there must be some amendments introduced into regional rules and standards
ну, в промышленных целях и не ухудшать
so that geothermal sites can be used for energy production. Because geothermal fluid is some natural phenomenon occurring in all regions of Kamchatka.
тех же рекреационных зон, которые
And
используются
they are used for recreation,
в виде естественных термопроявлений, которые в речках они и так присутствуют. Ну, естественные сбросы с тех вулканов, которые имеются. Но, к сожалению, в нашем направлении
Unfortunately, geothermal facilities
химической области промышленности, поэтому
are facilities are considered to be like chemical production, so which whose activity is prohibited in like nature reserves, for example. So, but we have studied legislation enough, and we know how to solve some problems, how to respond to some technical challenges. So we need to do that during our research and development activities.
мы имеем
So our
которые можно
estimates show that the outputs
не увеличивая дополнительные затраты на ресурсную часть.
can be profitable without major investments into infrastructure.
Генерация в тех горизонтах добычи, строительства геотермальных станций, мы имеем даже рост этого объема.
And we even can expect increased production because of addition of hydropower.
Ну и возвращаясь
And going back to wind potential and the Mutnovsky site,
строительство ВИА Да, обозначили мы здесь и рассмотрели возможность ветроизмерительных комплексов.
So we have already considered wind meters,
Позволяет нам уверенно говорить о том, что
and we are sure that
данный вид генерации тоже должен присутствовать.
this type of generation should be also present here, and it can be connected to the central power grid.
Который мы, скажем так, для себя поставили, он, в принципе, реализуем. Ну, то, что для региона и так понятно и реализуется, сформулировали в какие-то определенные задачи.
So we have estimated the demand of our region, and so we translated it into specific tasks. So we see our future in binary plants, and all our tasks are achievable, and we are working to reach them. Thank you, Alexei, for sharing your company's development plans. And as I understand, many of your projects will be implemented and within the existing economic model. And with the state support, their implementation will be even faster. And Kamchatsk-Energo has a number of unique projects you are not going to see in other regions of Russia. So I wish you every luck with their implementation, and they will be definitely in demand. So let's move further, and now I would like to give floor to Mr. Tищенко from Sakhalin-Energo. And I know that Sakhalin Oblast is now a member of the pilot project on carbon units. So does this somehow influence your projects? So please, could you speak on that a little as well?
Меня слышно, да, работает. Коллеги, добрый день.
Good afternoon, good morning, dear colleagues. Thank you for inviting me.
Да, я заместитель генерального директора.
I am Deputy Director of on investments of Sakhalin Energo, and I'm going to talk about this later.
Электроэнергетика.
Of course, renewable energy generation is our future, which starts today, and humankind is moving towards the exploration of various energy sources, and every time implementing some quality leap, more energy efficient. First they used wood, then coal, then water, then atom gas, and now we are on another leap to the renewable energy sources. And whereas atom and gas don't leave nuclear, some carbon print, we need to work, go further. For example, we have a floating nuclear power station in Pivek now, and sooner or later the replacements of such facilities as nuclear plant stations or gas generation, which is will end one day, and we will come to build and deploy the energy and use the energy of sun and wind sooner or later. So our energy systems are isolated, and also they are located on the territories with huge wind potential and high insularity. So we need to encourage the development of these areas, and the state should pay attention on these energy sources.
Да, мы реализуем
So
массу инвестиционных
we
проектов. Там
implement a wide range of investment programs,
возобновляемым источникам. Почему?
but there is no program on renewable energy sources. Why?
Источники финансирования
First, because the investment projects are financed by depreciation costs, and so these depreciation expenditures, they are used for supporting the main activities. And in the 1990s, there were no capital investment into an energy industry,
был наработан
and
в советское время. Он позволил
they were working on the
это десятилетие
foundation built in the Soviet times.
выстоять и отработать.
And this foundation enabled them to work for another decade,
Когда мы приходим домой,
because when we come home and we switch on the lights and we see our appliances working, we cannot think that this is not going to work. And when the power is out, people start panicking and like our food is going to rot and you cannot make your food.
серьезно и важно.
So this is very important in our life,
Да, особенно в Магадане.
and especially in Magadan, right?
Нужно заниматься. Но вот
So we need to ensure stable supply.
программы субъектов энергетики утверждаются на уровне Министерства энергетики
The
Российской
investment programs of the regions are approved on the federal level. And if we
энергетика. Просто инвестиционный проект, да, там по
if we decide to have, for example, investment project on wind farm or solar panels, and to include it in the federal program, there will be so many questions. And the questions would be, who is the applicant and who is going to pay for the connection? So the challenges in the legal regulation are big. And also there are some technical challenges. For example, Sakhalin Energo has a Novikovskaya diesel power station, and they have 2 wind turbines. So when with the wind under 5 meters a second, they are out. If it's higher than 15 meters a second, they also don't work. Then you have to use your diesel station. And the wind turbines, they only supplement the power generation. Of course, we save some diesel and we reduce emissions, but their capacity is only 25 kilowatts, so which is very tiny.
Следует отметить, что правительство Сахалинской области
So the government of Sakhalin
активно поддерживает потенциальных инвесторов.
supports potential investors. We have continuous meetings and we discuss technical issues.
Планов громадье. Они
So
планируют
we have huge plans. So they have plans for wind power generation in the coastal areas of 60 megawatt capacity, and for the coal deposit, coal field. So they are thinking about ensuring 100% of their energy by wind. But you don't need this energy 24 hours a day. And then they say that you are going to
такую генерацию, которая вдруг ни с того ни с сего на тебе в сеть.
to connect it to the central power grid. But what we are going to do with the existing like heat power stations, for example,
Не могут
so you cannot reduce power production at heat power stations. And this power from wind farms can come at any moment. So technically it's difficult. So with the power generation at capacity of 60 megawatts, you need
Решающей мощности для того, чтобы оперативно заместить эту мощность, если она выйдет ну, по каким-то
you need
причинам.
to also to have some reserve for
Поэтому, да, еще такой момент.
to substitute the system if it goes out.
Они датские.
For example, and also wind turbines in Novikova, they are of Danish production. I haven't heard about any Russian ones. As for solar panels, they are also imported from other countries. So when we are talking about the large-scale modernization of our power industry, we need to modernize our industry as well, which will help to modernize power industry. So we need to regulate those relations between the energy grids and potential investors
Для того, чтобы
so that
в рамках правового поля
within the existing legal framework, work on the replacement of coal in our industry, in our lives.
энергетика возобновляемая, но она, ну да, есть проекты, но они как бы вот.
So of course there are projects using renewable energy sources, but they are at the very beginning.
Что касается, да, я технарь, я практик, и вот.
I'm a technical specialist themselves, and
Если надо делать, то делать надо.
my approach to life is if you are to do something, do it.
Здесь, да, я согласен с коллегами.
And I agree with our colleagues that the state also should step in.
Пилотного проекта.
And as for the Sakhalin pilot project, so Sakhalin is actually a pilot project by itself in terms of quoting carbon emissions. So we have 2 coal stations, and we produce lots of carbon.
Нас это коснется. Пока на самом деле
In fact,
готовится
now
активная база.
we are preparing our regional legal framework, and
Более подробным образом я не готов сказать.
so I'm not ready to bring some specific details
Как-то двигаться в сторону того,
how we are going to move to reduce our carbon emissions. But first we need to receive our quota. Of course, there will be certain limits for gas emissions and for carbon emissions.
каких-то конкретных инвестиционных проектов, направленных на снижение, ну, кроме как
There are no specific investment projects on reducing those emissions.
вот это вот
And
компания
most likely,
выдачи квот
the
подвигнет.
company setting this campaign of setting limits of emissions will encourage power producing
По развитию
companies to
хозяйства сегодня
switch to other sources of power generation. But the existing facilities, of course, require major investments because it's quite vulnerable, and the power facilities in the Russian Far East,
есть масса примеров, когда под воздействием природных
they
катаклизмов
definitely experience some damages from natural disasters, and especially in the Russian Far East. And people working in the power industry in the Russian Far East, they
на то, чтобы существующее хозяйство
focus on maintaining the existing
привести на новый уровень,
facilities.
привести в нормативное состояние. Вот такая необходимость существует. То есть этот один как бы момент, но отсюда не то чтобы вывод, но
And to enter a new level, you need to change the existing legislation as well. And also we need to sort out our thoughts and ideas also, because both producers and regulating bodies, we should work together to be on the same page. That's all. Thank you. Thank you, Evgeny, for changing your, for sharing your opinion and your problems.
Министерство энергетики вас там часто не слышит, да?
You mentioned that the Ministry of Energy, Federal Ministry, doesn't listen to you often or hear you, but I think that every region should convey their opinion to the people on the federal level. And as far as I know, they being professionals, they can hear and they can listen, and they are ready to work and to help regions.
Да, микрофон включите.
Марк Владимирович, микрофон включи, пожалуйста.
К вашей зоне обслуживания, да? Ну, вот строите возобновляемую...
For example, you bring some renewable energy sources facility. What is the source of funding? What about depreciation? The depreciation should be used for maintaining existing facilities. So then they say, use your profit, but we don't have profit because the regulator doesn't have it. So their opinion will be, and the region or investor won't make this decision to build this. So when other investors come, the state will give them money. So here is a different story. So the history of joint stock companies. So they used to be the RAO, United Systems of Russia. So they divided that. So everyone is working for profit. So everyone is in the same conditions. But Sakhalin Energo, it's a vertically integrated company, right? So I mean that so vertical integrated companies are not unpacked, and so the challenges you are facing, they have solutions, but yes, indeed, you need to prove, you have to persuade and convince that this is going to be the best solution from the technical point of view. So that's why I'm calling for starting a dialogue, because our president talked about this modernization, and the internal market has become our priority under the current situation. And so I think here is now we have higher chances of getting the state support. So I urge you to use this program, to use this opportunity, and Sakhalin is definitely a pilot site for using RES, and of course there are challenges, and of course we are limited in finances, but we are to look for sources and for ways to solve them. So at the next conference, I'm going to tell about what will happen to us in terms of carbon emissions. And
как бы реплику. Когда мы говорим
When
Про инвестиции,
we are talking about investments,
капитальные вложения, которые приносят
some capital investments which are going to bring some results in the mid-term and long-term perspective. And because businesses will come only if the project will be effective. But we must understand that power industry is largely infrastructure. And
вложения в эту
investments
инфраструктуру должны
into
обязательно
infrastructure must, and saying that investments into infrastructure must bring profit is not quite correct, because power and energy is a part of our everyday life, and so this is about ensuring standards of living and not making profit. Thank you, Evgeny. I'm sure we will discuss and have some maybe arguments later. Of course, energy production is socially oriented, but it's also business. As we are pressed for time, let's move further. And now we are going to have some academic block. And we have our colleagues who are going to share their experience in terms of renewable energy sources. And now the floor goes to Alexander Fishov, professor from Novosibirsk State Technical University, and he is going to join us online.
Добрый день. Добрый день, коллеги. Слышно, все нормально?
Да, все отлично.
Ну, я вначале немножко как-то себя представлю, что я...
Good morning. Let me introduce myself. I'm a very practical person, although I'm a doctor of science. I had to work in a grid company, and I spent 5 years at Central Dispatcher Administration. So I know the facility not only from the outside, but from the inside also. But still, I focus in my activities on the development of technologies of management and formation of energy systems. Meaning that today we are discussing the development of sources of electrical energy, and we focus on renewable, promising and green energy sources. But now we are actually quite doubtful about how green they are. And if we read literature, and if we talk about the full life cycle, this energy production cannot be called fully environmentally friendly.
Где, собственно, огромные лесные массивы и, так сказать, положительный этот углеродный баланс.
And with this positive carbon balance, our country uses more, like inhales more carbon than we emit. But what are the main points? My presentation is called, I will now start a presentation.
Получилось, видно?
Can you see my presentation?
Да.
Oh, yes, we can.
Он называется
It's called Integration of Local Energy Systems in the Unified Energy Systems of Low Capacity with Multi-Agent System of Decentralized Management of the General Regime. I know that it is very difficult to understand anything from this title, but now I will try to explain what I mean. I agree that we have to develop this small generation energy, and I support this hybrid type generation, not only in a specific facility, not only power plant can be hybrid, but
И жизнь показала, что так должно быть. Гибридная энергосистема,
The
когда
energy
множество
system
негибридных объектов
as a
собираются в
whole
некоторую систему.
can be
Вот
hybrid.
этот опыт у нас уже там, почти
We
вековой. Имею в виду,
have
что
had
я-то
almost
из
a
Новосибирска,
century
это
of
ОС
such
Сибири,
experience.
Объединенная
I come
энергосистема.
from
Ну, достаточно
Novosibirsk,
сказать,
from
что
Siberia,
половина
and
установленной
it's enough
мощности–
to say
это
that half
гидростанции
of the
в Сибирском
installed
регионе.
capacity
И
are
поэтому 50 на
hydro
50,
plants.
топливная и
So
возобновляемая. Поэтому в
50-50 we
любом
have
уровне
fuel
эффективности, ну,
and
правда, это на
renewable energy.
источниках большой мощности.
But
Но тем
this
не
is
менее,
true
каждый из
for the
этих
sources
источников
of
малоэффективен,
high
пока он не является
capacity.
источником локальной
But
системы.
as long as
Но в
they
ОС
are
Сибири
the
высокоэффективная на
sources
самом деле
for
система
local
энергоснабжения
systems,
за
they are
счет
not
того, что
very
там
efficient.
гибридная генерация совокупности. А эффективность создается не только этой
And the
генерацией, как таковой
efficiency
ее
is
осуществляет,
produced not
но и
only by
эффективной
this
системой
generation,
управления.
but also by an
Поэтому
efficient
для
management
территорий,
system.
которые
That is why for the
с
territories
малой плотностью
with
населенности,
low
с большими
density of
территориями,
population and
с такими,
uh,
где, в общем-то,
vast
сконцентрирована
areas
централизованную систему,
and
создавать нестабильность
decentralized
экономическую.
systems,
Естественный путь развития–
the
это вот
natural way of
добрать
development for them
источников малой
is
мощности
based
и
on the
создание, вот,
small capacity sources.
сейчас, секундочку, как-то должно двигаться. Вот я попробовал себе представить
I
этапы
have
развития
tried
энергетики
to
на основе распределенной
imagine
малой генерации. Я
the
говорю не
stages of
большие.
development based on
Ну
the
вот первый
distributed
этап– это
small
создание
generation
множества
on
локальных
vast
систем
areas. The first
энергоснабжения на
stage
основе
is to
единичных
create a
источников
lot of
энергии. Ну, это мощностью порядка там,
distributed
50
energy
мегаватт с проблемами
systems with
надежности
some tens
энергоснабжения и
of
высококачественной
megawatts
электроэнергии и плохой
and who
переносимости.
are not quite
Ну, это вот
reliable in
первый
terms
здесь
of supply.
отпечаток, если его так назвать.
This is
Есть
number one that you can see
удаленные
on the screen.
локальные системы энергоснабжения. И
Local
это известный
systems of
факт,
power
что
supply.
достичь
And
высокой надежности,
it is known
экономической эффективности, окупаемости там, в таких, в общем-то,
that
объектах
it is
чрезвычайно трудно.
very
Вот
difficult
следующий
to
этап
reach
развития
any
энергоснабжения описывает расположенность
reliability
средств
and
в
payback from such
объединенной энергосистеме малой мощности
facilities.
с
Then the
распределенной
next
генерацией
stage
для
is the
компенсации
distributed
значительной степени
generation
отмеченных недостатков и
to
рисков.
compensate
Но при этом еще
the
попутно
identified
расширяется территория
drawbacks. And
обеспечиваемого энергоснабжения.
also there is a
Здесь,
wider
как правило, это
territory
уже
for
вот десятки
power supply.
мегаватт. И вот приблизительно такой отпечаток может
And the picture
визуализировать
for
средний
such
этап.
generation
И,
can be like
наконец,
that.
объединение
And
пограничных
finally,
участков
the
таких локальных объединенных
joining
энергосистем
of
в
local
энергосистемы
joint
малой
energy
мощности,
systems into the
достаточно
energy systems
большой
of
мощности совокупности.
small
Я
capacity,
могу
and
сказать, что
in the
чем
end they will give
крупнее
a
объединение,
higher
тем выше
capacity.
его там достижимые за счет управления показатели
And
экономической эффективности, там,
the
инвестиционные
ratios
привлекательности
of
и
economical
так далее.
efficiency and
Значит,
investment
сейчас, секундочку.
attractiveness, they will be higher in this case.
Назад, пожалуйста. Я хотел маленький такой
I
экскурс
wanted
сделать. Вот,
to
говоря
brief
о,
you
моя основная
on the
задача сейчас– это
background
презентовать технологию для
of this
создания
technology. My
систем
basic task
управления
now is to
в
present the
областях, которые,
technology of
ну,
management
например,
system in
Сахалин,
the
там, Курильская
areas,
гряда, например.
such
То
areas
есть
as
для
Sakhalin
как раз
or
систем, которые строятся на основе
Kuril.
распределенной малой по территории генерации.
So they are
И
based
вот
on
сама по
this
себе проблема, она
distributed generation.
достаточно
The
общая.
problem
Даже,
is quite
я бы
common.
так сказал, вот
I would even
город
say that
Новосибирск– это мегаполис, третий город
Novosibirsk is a megapolis.
в России. Тем не менее,
It
в
ranks
границы
third
города
in terms
растут.
of population in
Уже
Russia, and
известно,
it
что
is
исчерпаны
growing, it is
возможности
expanding, and we
целесообразности
are now
централизованного энергоснабжения
already
в этих
short of
разросшихся
our
границах.
capacities of
Затраты на
centralized
сетевое
energy
строительство,
supply.
потери, которые там
And
возникают,
all the
сложности
costs, the
управления
construction
объектом,
costs, and the
они возрастают
losses,
как
and some
геометрически.
management problems,
Поэтому и
they
в
are
Новосибирске
growing. So
развивается
that's why
только полигон
in
внешний, как бы, для старых границ города развивается малая генерация. Это,
Novosibirsk,
как
we are
правило,
also developing
когенерационные
smaller
электростанции, которые
generation
вот, возводятся в связи со строительством дополнительных новых жилмассивов,
because we
являются
have a
основным
lot of new
источником
housing
энергоснабжения для
built in
жилмассивов.
our
Но они
city.
интегрируются потом в единую
And all these smaller power plants, they are integrated into the general system. So I would refer to the experience. We have recently implemented a pilot project on creating mini grids.
Длинным названием. Это мини-грид. Значит, допустим, вот ее режим автономной работы,
So
она так работала
the
несколько лет.
autonomous regime of this mini grid is typical of these negative consequences that I have already identified. But
По сути дела, топливный или углеродный гибрид электростанции, он из-за плохого графика
this
нагрузки
station, because of a bad load schedule,
составлял порядка 20 лет. И для инвесторов это
it made
совершенно
some 20
непривлекательно.
years. And for investors, this is absolutely not attractive. But after being integrated into a unified energy system, because we eliminate all these negative consequences, the payback period becomes shorter, and now it's some 5 to 7 years, which is quite acceptable for the investors, and they are very interested in that.
Вот следуя дальше, я бы так
That is why, going further, I would say that the more systems we create, the more effective it becomes. So we had unified energy systems of Russia.
Сейчас она называется ЕС России, страны СНГ и Балтии. Ну,
Now it's yes of Russia, Baltic, and CIS countries. I'm not sure about the Baltic countries now. Maybe they are already separated. But anyway, it's a huge system. There is also a European system for Western Europe. And we have long considered the possibility of further integration. So, in order to establish energy systems, we need management systems to implement some system functions. And the key ones are here. It's the assembling of facilities, management of balances of active capacity, management of balance of reactive capacities, anti-emergency management, and the maintenance of integrity of the grid and normal regime of functioning. I cannot speak in more detail, but I have to say that these systems, they can include both centralized and decentralized systems as multi-agents. So for the territories with a low density of population and high number of small generation facilities, this decentralized system is much more promising because it requires, it involves less costs than the creation of centralized management system. Here I have a table, a graph. As long as we have already had some pilot projects, here I have a table for the evaluation of those who have developed all these systems, like the developers of mini grids and the designers of mini grids. The owners of mini grids who invest their resources and who seek profit. I would like to draw your attention
хотел бы обратить ваше внимание, что вот интегральная
to the
оценка
fact that the
специалистов, она
integrated
такова.
assessment
Если
of these
автономно
specialists is that
работает
if you work autonomously,
локальная система,
if
то
this local
интегральная
system
оценка,
works
я это сейчас
autonomously,
говорю о
then
порядке
the
вещей, это минус 119.
evaluation is
Если мы
minus
с
119.
автоматическим
And
резервом от какой-то внешней
if
сети,
it's a
но без
mini grid,
параллельной работы, то чуть-чуть лучше
then
становится.
it
Ну, разделился.
becomes a little bit
Вот
better,
хорошо
minus
сильно вот этой
92.
малой генерации, если она интегрирована в сеть ЕС, например. Ну, как это вот в пилотном проекте. Вы видите, все
So
минусы
it's
ушли,
good
осталось
for
преимущество
the smaller
84.
generation to be
Но
integrated
для
into
допустим,
a
Сахалина, там, где это
larger
существует,
grid.
и более перспективно эта
But,
интеграция
for
между
example,
собой.
for Sakhalin, it will
Ну,
be
вот
more
здесь тоже вы
promising to
видите
integrate
общая
them
оценка
between
49 с
themselves.
плюсом.
And
Заметьте,
here
что
the
по отношению к
total
автономной работе
evaluation is
и
41
даже с резервом каким-то
plus
внешним,
41,
это очень хороший
which is
результат.
a very good result.
Поэтому, ну вот здесь есть небольшая, так сказать, информация о пилотном проекте, где, по
Here
сути
you
дела,
can see some information about the
система, она
pilot
состоит из
project,
того, что на
where
каждом
this
объекте создается
multi-agent
независимая интеллектуальная система
system
управления,
implies
которая,
the
в
establishment
общем-то,
of
превращает
independent
этот объект
intellectual management
в
system,
объект
which
бесшумный,
turns
без
this
работы в
facility
динамическом режиме, при этом сам
into an
синхронизируется в этот
automatic
автономный режим,
facility
выбирает
because it
состав
works
оборудующего
automatically.
оборудования. И все это в полной мере может относиться и к гибридным электростанциям, кстати.
And it can be
Поэтому
true for
вот этот
hybrid power
пилотный
stations.
проект там
So,
опробован, кроме того, что эффективность саму
this pilot project tested the efficiency, the reliability, and the economy of mini-grid, and also they tested this technology of multi-agent management.
Ну вот здесь небольшая фотография, собственно, этот
This
агент, это
is
шкаф
a
системной
photo
автоматики,
of
так
this
называемая.
agent,
В данном
which
случае
is
это
this
разработка
like a
новосибирская, но
automatic
с участием
cabinet
даже по заказу
or
известной
box.
Россети. Здесь у меня есть информация о том,
Here I have some
что
information
функции выполняют,
on
как
other
программно-аппаратный
functions
комплекс. Ну, я
of this
думаю, в данном
complex,
случае это не так важно.
but I think that
Просто
it's not
интересно,
that
что там есть
important. It's
автооператор,
just,
или
it's
как
interesting
самолет
that there
летит,
is like an
участие пилотов,
autopilot
открытие объекта, в
there.
общем-то,
They
разработка
can operate
автоматического
like planes with autopilot
И я
regime.
хотел бы просто
And
сегодня
also, I
зафиксировать,
just wanted
что
to
принимая решение
state
такое
that
глобальное за
making some
развитие,
global
надо иметь
decision
как фактор
on development, we have to keep in
построения
mind the
системы управления
factor
и на
of
каком-то
creating a
этапе
management
сделать
system.
правильно
And
обоснованную
at some
крупную
point,
систему управления,
we have
строить
to create
вот
a
для Сахалина, для
well-grounded
вашего региона. На мой
management
взгляд, наиболее
system for
подходящее
your
для
region.
этого. И сегодня эта технология, кстати,
And
вот,
I
мы
think
очень
that
активно ей
today,
занимаемся
this
с
technology,
индивидуальными
we are
агентами,
dealing with
разработаны
it
технологические
very
системные
actively
функции на
these
уровне
days.
прототипов, разработаны, проверены на физических
And
моделях.
these
Я
system
думаю, что
functions, they have been
технологическая
developed on
готовность
the level of prototypes and they have been tested on the models. So I think
Вот у меня
that in
такое
about a year
небольшое
it will be
сообщение,
complete.
относящееся к
So
формированию
this is
системы из объектов с малой
some
генерацией.
presentation from
Спасибо.
me. Thank
Да,
you.
спасибо, Александр Георгиевич.
Yes, thank
Спасибо за
you,
то, что представили свои
Mr. Fishov, for
наработки, да,
presenting
и, ну,
your
наверное, сложно там не согласиться с тем, что
developments. And
действительно
of course, we agree
эффекты
that
вот интеграции,
the
да, от
effects
объединенных
from
систем, они
integration of
колоссальные, да,
united
синергия в этом
systems,
плане там
they are
неоспорима,
huge
и
and
надо
it
сказать,
is
что
indisputable.
у нас как-то в части централизованной энергосистемы эти
And
процессы идут, да, и там
these
Саха-Якутия подключилась
processes
к
are
централизованной.
on in terms of
Ну и, конечно,
centralized
задача
energy
таких
systems,
малых
and Yakutia
локальных
has
зон
joined this system. And of
объединяться,
course,
да, но
the
опять
task
там
of such local zones
какие-то
is to
предпосылки есть,
join together, and there are
развитие
some
и так далее,
prerequisites for
дорогостоящее
it, because we understand
удовольствие. Вот.
that it's
Тем не
quite
менее,
expensive, of course.
Александр
But
Георгиевич
still,
понимает, что
Mr. Fishov,
вас слушают
understanding
представители
that
компаний, да,
you
мне
are
кажется,
listened by the representatives of
вы
the
могли бы эти
companies, I
конкретные
think
проекты, наработки обсудить
you could discuss the specific
представителями
projects and
компании.
developments with the
Окей,
representatives of the
двигаемся
companies.
дальше.
So let's move on.
Мне бы сейчас хотелось
Now I would like
предоставить
to give the
слово
floor to
нашему коллеге
our
из
colleague
нашей как это партнерской
from our
страны, соседа из нашего стратегического, который
partner
является таким
country,
локомотивом, наверное, развития и
which
экономики, и
is an
энергетики.
example of development of
Я
energy.
говорю сейчас о, конечно, Китайской Республике.
I'm talking about China.
Хотел предоставить слово Ван Вэню, декану и профессору Института финансовых исследований.
I would like to give the floor to Van Ven,
Расскажите, как вы видите
the executive
сотрудничество
dean and
с
professor of
Россией, с,
Institute for Financial Studies from Renmin University of
потому что, мне
China.
кажется, эти связи
Please
в
tell
первую
us how you see our cooperation.
какие-то, может быть, проблемы во взаимодействии, да, то есть что вам кажется необходимо усилить,
What we can strengthen, and if there are some problems with cooperation, etc. What could we do to promote them? So, Mr. Van Ven, please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, okay. No, not this one. Next one. The red one. Not this one. No. Not this one. Could you 换一个?
Так, презентация должна быть другая. Да.
Yes. Okay, no problem. I without PPT, I just very. Sorry. I'm so sorry. I cannot speak in Russia. I'm just speak in English, but very briefly. Just want to show. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. I know the time is very limited, but even I prepared the PPT very long, very list a lot of points. But I try my best to just a point. I just want to share with you 3 points.
Я знаю, что мы ограничены во времени, но подготовила очень длинную презентацию, поэтому выдержки какие-то из нее расскажу вам.
First of all, I want to share with you is that 2021, last year for China is very, very important because China started the carbon neutrality, and also similar with Russia.
Прошлый год был очень важным в Китае, потому что он был объявлен впервые годом углеродной нейтральности. Я знаю, что в России тоже есть подобная программа.
And also as a think tank scholar in China, I focus on the low carbon study, green finance study, and one of our mission is study and learn from the world, especially US, especially Russia. So we focus on the Russia's development very quickly, very widely.
И поскольку я ученый, я как раз занимаюсь снижением углеродных выбросов, и мы изучаем опыт других стран, и в частности России.
But right now, I just I listen my colleagues' presentation. I really learn a lot. As our president, China President Xi Jinping, last year, we want to establish the deeper energy cooperation partnership with Russia.
В прошлом году председатель нашего правительства Си Цзиньпинь высказал мнение, что Китай должен плотнее работать с Россией.
And in terms of our top levels design, I think China and Russia can be the global leader in the low carbon energy cooperation in the future.
И поскольку лидеры обеих наших стран очень поддерживают это, я думаю, что наши страны должны задавать тренды и стать опорой в глобальном углеродном нейтралитете.
I think so. I want to share very briefly 3 points.
Остановлюсь вкратце на 3 моментах.
First point is that for the renewable energy investment, this year, the first half of this year, the total value in the global investment of renewable energy. It's over 25 billion US dollars, and China accounts for nearly half.
За первое полугодие этого года, если говорить об инвестициях в развитие в мире, они составили более 25 миллиардов долларов США, и половина из этой суммы приходится на долю Китая.
And China has carried out for more than 100 billion US dollars in the past 20 years in the clean energy investment.
Если говорить вообще об инвестициях Китая в последнее время в зеленую энергию, они составляют более 100 миллиардов долларов США.
And China nowadays is become the biggest clean energy, renewable energy investor in the world.
И сейчас Китай является крупнейшим инвестором в чистую и возобновляемую энергетику в мире.
And also we think that Russia, as my colleague right now said, Russia is the biggest potential renewable and low carbon energy in the world.
И как уже сказали мои коллеги, сейчас Россия является самым, наверное, перспективным рынком для развития в мире.
And in my PPT, I just list a lot of very typical local cooperation project in renewable energy and green carbon development projects. I don't want to waste time to do it. I just very quickly, for example, in Amur region, in Khabarovsk region, and also in Ulyanovsky region, we all have a lot of cooperation projects between China and Russia.
В презентации у меня указано много конкретных проектов нашего сотрудничества. Не буду подробно останавливаться, но это проекты реализуются в Амурской области, Хабаровском крае, Ульяновской области.
And also we deeply believe that Russia, whatever in solar energy, in hydropower energy, in wind energy, all has a very huge potential. So that's why we think not only in Sakha or in the other republic or the other regions, we just focus on and find on those investment opportunity.
И Россия обладает огромным потенциалом развития и солнечной энергетики, и гидро- и ветроэнергетики, и поэтому мы, конечно, смотрим и на Республику Саха, и на другие регионы в поисках возможных проектов.
So final things I want to share with you is that for the lasting cooperation between Russia and China, we have to do two things. The first thing is we need established those fundamental. The second thing is that we should push the policy coordination and cooperation.
И для того, чтобы обеспечить долгосрочное сотрудничество в области развития зеленой энергетики между нашими странами, мы, конечно, должны выработать некие основы и позаботиться о совершенствовании законодательной базы.
And first of all, I think we need to have establish those attainable and low map for the carbon neutrality in 2060. So that's a huge strategy.
И я думаю, что в первую очередь мы должны разработать дорожную карту до 60-го года. Это, конечно, очень большая задача.
And we can have a mutual the common target. For example, why not to establish the Far East as a global center of renewable energy in the future?
И я думаю, что мы можем поставить такую некую общую для нас цель, сделать Дальний Восток глобальным центром развития ВИА. Почему бы нет?
And second thing is as my PPT shared, that maybe we can cooperation for design the common the green standard, including green finance, green investment, green carbon development, green carbon trade, something like that. I think we can have a lot of things to do.
И, кроме того, я думаю, чем мы могли заняться совместно, это выработать совместные стандарты, выработать общие какие-то технические решения для этих проектов.
I think that, as we all know, China is the first carbon emitter in the world, and Russia is number 4 carbon emitter in the world, and we can have a huge cooperation potential in the world, and also based on those cooperation, I think China and Russia can be, in the future, can be the global leader for new renewable element as well as a new carbon development.
Конечно, вы знаете, что на сегодняшний день Китай больше всего выбрасывает, делает углеродных выбросов, а Россия занимает 4-е место. И поэтому естественно, что нам нужно объединиться, чтобы решать эту проблему и стать глобальными лидерами зеленой энергетики.
My PPT is very, very long. I can share my PPT to you, and also time very limited. I'm stop here. Thank you again.
Вы сможете подробнее ознакомиться с моим мнением в моей презентации, которая доступна, а я останавливаюсь. Спасибо.
Да, спасибо, Вануэй. Во-первых, спасибо за то, что
Thank
вы
you, Mr. Van Ven,
позитивно смотрите
for
на
being
наше
so
сотрудничество.
positive about our cooperation. Yes, indeed, there are a lot of projects, especially in our current conditions.
Дружественных стран у нас
As long as we have less and less friendly countries, and
технологий и опыта.
China, taking into account its technologies and experience, it is our strategic partner. And I hope that your participation in this conference and your communication with the colleagues
Развитие наших
will
отношений для
give you further,
такой
will give some
кооперации.
further development of our communications and cooperations. And I also have no doubt that the Far East could become a center of competence in the development of renewable energy sources. So thank you very much again for coming and for sharing your experience.
Хотелось бы, конечно, чтобы
And
вот с коллегами, которые участвуют
it would be good
в этом
if
круглом столе и
you could
в последующих
communicate with the
секциях
colleagues from these
познакомились для
roundtable,
полях таких
because I believe that on the platforms of such conferences we can establish some cooperation and understanding for further
У нас
work. Thank you.
завершающий
And the final speaker
тоже от науки.
is also from science. I wanted to give the floor to Dmitry Prokhorov, the senior researcher of Larionov Institute of Physical and Technical Problems of the North of Siberian branch of Russian Academy of Sciences. Mr. Prokhorov, the floor
Добрый
is
день
yours.
всем участникам круглого
Good
стола.
morning to all participants of the
Я
roundtable.
являюсь сотрудником отдела проблем энергетики.
I work at the Department of Energy Problems of the Institute
Якутской науки.
of Yakutsk Science, let's
В своем
say.
докладе хотел бы
In my presentation, I wanted to tell you
работы, которые проводились
about the works that have been conducted and are conducted by our department.
является
It is
наиболее компетентным
as the most competent in renewable energy sources because it has a long
разработок в
record of developments in RES
среди всех
among all
научных институтов.
scientific institutes and educational institutions of Yakutia.
Ну, все разработки в области
All developments in renewable energy
в отделе
in our department were very
тех
trendy
исследований, да, в области возобновляемой
in
энергетики,
terms
допустим,
of
вот,
research in
начали
RES.
началась работа по возобновляемой
We
энергетике
started working on RES
1962 года.
by assessing the hydro potential of Yakutia's rivers in the 1960s because they constructed Viluisk hydropower plant at that time for the development of our diamond industry. So they assessed the hydro potential of Yakutia's rivers, and it is still conducted.
Были обследованы, то есть проводились полевые исследования, выезжали
They
на места.
have conducted
Сотрудниками
field
нашего
works
отдела
and
практически
examined
рек,
and many
крупных рек.
rivers and basins of large rivers.
Также проводится вот в последние годы, да, оценка
Recently,
потенциала малых рек.
we have evaluated the potential, the capacity of small rivers for the productive capacities of gold mining industry.
Быть заинтересованы в этих
They could be
разработках.
interested
То
in
есть
such
это
developments.
вводились оценки потенциала малых рек, бассейнов,
They worked
больших рек,
in
таких как вот, например, Яна, Индигирка.
basins
где
of
есть
such rivers as
множество
Yana and Indigirka,
золотоносных месторождений.
with a lot of gold-bearing
Последнее
deposits.
исследование было проводилось в 2016 году.
The last
Проводилось.
examination, the survey, was conducted in 2016.
Также область исследования
Also, the area of surveying includes wind
Началось это с
power production. It began in 1989
ресурсов нашей
when they produced a cadastre of wind energy resources of Yakutia.
В 2015 году
In 2015,
совместно
together
японской стороны это компания
upon the invitation of Kamae Haltek, Kanedo, and Matsui from Japan,
оценки
we
ветропотенциала и
evaluated the wind potential
предоставление различных рекомендаций, да, в
and
области
produced
нашего климата
recommendations
для
for our climate
строительства ветроэнергетической
for the
станции. И вот
construction
результаты
of wind power
работы,
plant, which resulted
в
in
частности, может, частично, да, это строительство
the
ветроэнергетической станции,
construction of wind power plant in the settlement of
которая
Tixi,
сейчас работает.
which is now being operated.
Также по 2020 году
Also in 2020,
по инициативе
under the initiative of the Ministry of Housing and Utilities of Yakutia
у нас проводилась вот
and
работа
the
по
Millennium Institute of Energy,
технико-экономической оценке эффективности
we
организации индивидуального отопления
produced
на
technical and economical feasibility report for the efficiency
и
of
сравнивалось вот
organizing
индивидуальное отопление на основе древесных пеллет и центральное
individual
отопление на угле.
heating for the consumers based on wooden pellets in the Arctic settlements.
Получили, хорошие
Also, we
оценки, да, от заказчика.
received some
Министерство
good feedback and were
то есть нет,
graded highly by the orderers.
Ну и в настоящее время
At present,
сказать, что у нас в республике,
in our republic,
в России, да,
or maybe in Russia in general,
возобновляемая энергетика используется для
renewable
электрогенерации.
energy is
Вот мы для нашего, да хотя бы для научных исследований, нам было
used
интересно проверить, посмотреть,
for
каким
scientific
можно ли
research as well.
использовать
So it would be interesting for
солнечную
us to
энергетику
see
для
whether this
именно солнечных
solar power
горячего
production could be used for heating and hot
для
water
солнечного
supply.
отопления это было бы очень интересно.
We would be quite
Проводятся
interested
такие
in
исследования.
researching
сейчас
and
в данное время
surveying this
год.
area.
Ну, также проводятся исследования
Also, we are conducting
инсоляции.
research on
нашем
measuring the
институте.
insulation.
Ну и так как данных, да, по инсоляции
As long
активно-электрических
as
станций очень мало.
We have very little data for
Вообще,
this
на территории России.
insulation.
Такие данные очень могут быть полезны для
This data could be very useful
скажем так,
for comparing
представленных различных моделей, по
the models
агрессионных моделей, так и других моделей по оценке
to evaluate
солнечного излучения, их
solar radiation
сравнение, да, с реальными
and to
данными.
compare them with the real data and to produce models that could be useful
энергетическим компаниям.
for energy companies and industry.
Наш институт совместно очень
Our
плотно
institute
работает с Институтом
works
системной энергетики.
together with Millennium Institute of System Energy.
Также мы плотно работаем
Also, we closely
государственной власти, да,
cooperate with executive authorities, the Ministry of the Arctic, the Ministry of Housing and Utilities.
закон по ВИЭ для республики.
We have developed a law on the renewable energy sources for the Republic, and since 2015, we have been developing a scheme of development of energy, including renewable energy sources, and we have had quite a good feedback.
Также, в принципе, с энергетическими компаниями
And
связи, но и сейчас
the same is true for the energy companies. We are continuing to work with Yakutsk-Energo, Sakha-Energo.
Ну и вот наши коллеги, допустим, из ССМ тоже хорошие связи поддерживают.
And we are keeping good communication with the energy companies of Yakutia.
Илья Алексеевич говорил насчет каких-то проблем, каких-то, да,
Ilya mentioned some problems and difficulties
с работой с
with
энергетическими компаниями.
working with energy companies and industry and business. Yes, there are, of course,
Со стороны особенно.
difficulties, especially from the energy companies. From the executive authorities, I wouldn't say that we have a lot of problems. But we just want to say that the works that we have conducted
Получили хорошие отзывы.
have had good feedback, and we are ready to work with industries and businesses and energy companies in renewable energy sources. So the same, that models that we are producing now, they could be useful for them.
Технические какие-то аспекты
And some technical aspects and problems
мы тоже можем изучить.
can be also investigated, and we can give recommendations. So thank you for your attention. Thank you, Dmitry, for sharing your experience. I think that
реально является центром компетенции в Якутии, да, и, конечно,
you are a real center of competence in Yakutia, and to collaborate with the colleagues from Novosibirsk and China, it has to be done, and you have to cooperate with the companies, because the implementation of different projects, they of course involve some scientific cooperation. So, dear colleagues, we
подошли к нашему финалу, все спикеры
have come to the end, and we are out of time because we started later, of course. It was a real pleasure for me to listen to everybody. I think that we have had quite an interesting exchange of experiences and the presentation of projects and promising projects that are planned for implementation and what problems we're facing. I would like to thank everybody for finding time and possibility to come and to speak. And I wish that in 1 year we come here again and to share, to tell everybody what we have completed, what projects have been implemented, and what would be the plans for the future, so that we could feel that this area is being developed and the problems are being solved. So with that, I would like to finish our roundtable. Thank you to all speakers and to all the audience. Keep visiting our events, because we have a very tight agenda for 2 days. Thank you.
Recording stopped.